Aloha and welcome to All About Adoption. My name is Christine Altwies and with me today is my good friend Patrick Taylor. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. So we are talking today always in the context of helping prospective adoptive parents or parents in general understand their children better. So today we're going to talk a little bit about attachment. And one of the things that you and I were talking about earlier was understanding our own attachment issues as adults, looking back to our childhood and thinking about what happened, what we may not have really contemplated at the time it was happening, what we may not understand until later on in life, but how once we start understanding who we are vis-a-vis attachment, we can become better adults, and in your case, better mental health professionals.
Right.
So with all that, why don't we start at the beginning and maybe tell us a little bit about your childhood and talk us up to the point where you started wondering about your own ability to attach.
Okay. Well, to start, I was one of three siblings who was born in Massachusetts, and we were being looked over by our mother while my father was away in the military. For whatever reason, we were going to be put into a foster home because she was unable to care for us. And our father learned of this information and came and got us before that could happen. When that did happen, he brought us down to his parents' house in South Carolina, and there we were raised for the next 6 years by our grandparents.
So from the age of 0 to 2, you were with your birth mom.
Correct.
At around 2, you and your siblings were moved from the East Coast down to South Carolina.
Correct.
And you were raised until you were 8 there.
About 9, yeah.
9 by your grandparents. Okay. And after that?
After that, my father, eventually he got out of the military, and he came and decided it was time for him to take care of us. So he took us from that home, and we moved into another home. For a little while, he raised us on his own. Eventually married, and that was our first stepmother. And she was with us for quite some time. After they divorced, it was another period of just, our father taking care of us three, and eventually he remarried again. This time we were much older. My older brother was old enough. He eventually left home to go and reconnect with our mother up north. And that's pretty much the story of my childhood up until.
So what I find interesting and important about this, if I may, is that attachment challenges or childhood trauma doesn't always look like abuse or neglect or hunger, right?
Correct.
I mean, you had a bunch of loving people around you at all times. You were with your birth mother, then your father came and saved you from a foster home potentially, and you were with your loving grandparents. It sounded like you had a stable home there.
Right.
And then your father came and took care of you. So lots of loving people. But what we're looking at from a sort of trauma standpoint or from a informed child development standpoint is that you had a lot of breaks in consistency. You had a lot of disruptions, and each of those may have caused some sort of trauma that you later started looking at a little differently. Is that correct? Okay.
Correct. And I guess it would have started with my mother, and I never really thought about it until my father kept continuously checking in on us to see how we were feeling, and I just associate that situation with a type of abandonment. As time progressed, that seemed to be the only real one, except for I later realized that our father was in and out of our lives the whole time our grandparents were taking care of us. He was doing the best he could, and he was still in the military, but he would only come in short instances and he'd leave again. So
even when adults are trying their best, and even when adults are good people, sometimes the result of their actions can be traumatic for children.
Right.
So when did you start unpacking or focusing on why you may have turned out the way you did, which it seems to be successful.
Mm.
You're happy, you're well adjusted, you're focused on education and career. You're by all definitions a highly functioning, productive member of society, yet you feel like there are things that need work or
Right.
need help.
Well, I've always had just a natural curiosity about why. It's a universal question, and I probably won't ever have all the answers, but I do think there are reasons why I feel certain ways and how I act certain ways and stuff like that. For instance, I easily disassociate with someone in my life if I feel that they are not necessarily toxic, but just have wronged me, or I've trusted you and somehow you let me down.
Which sounds like a healthy thing for people to do, but do you feel like you're a little too quick to come to that decision?
I do. I mean, I think because I set strict rules for myself that kind of alienate a lot of people who could potentially be in my life, but taking into consideration the type of people they are and stuff like that isn't the first thought. It's how have you just wronged me, and how do I stop that from ever happening again?
So you're hard on yourself, you have high standards for yourself and your own behavior vis-a-vis other people, but likewise you hold others to that same standard, which may be a little
Yeah,
tough.
definitely.
Okay. All right, what else have you discovered?
That I definitely have walls. I have barriers that is hard to overcome. I don't let too many people get in too close. It's very easy for me to tell my story, but I don't let anyone get an emotional hold on me, I guess, because of my issues with vulnerability.
Okay.
And I'm still dealing with that to this day. So.
Okay. So vulnerability, you mentioned attachment, and in working with a therapist, you have discovered that some of the root causes of this, you believe, may lie in your childhood story.
Definitely.
Okay. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, after a couple years ago, I started doing therapy, and normally if I had an issue or if I was dealing with something in life, I would handle it myself because I could identify it. So what prompted me to go see a therapist was that I couldn't identify why I was upset, I felt like I was stuck while I was depressed, So I go to the therapist, and we end up talking a lot about some of the things that I just kind of forgot, I guess, and we revisited a lot of things in my past. Turns out that there's a lot of things that I had a lot of unpacking to do. I was diagnosed later with adjustment disorder, with anxiety and depression, based on my separation from my mother, how I felt about when my grandfather died, the things that led up to my divorce and my marriage, and I guess I'm still trying to figure it out, but I'm doing a lot better now that we have identified why I'm having these issues and what they're attributed to.
And I think the reason why I find your story so important to share, and thank you for sharing it, I know it's not easy, but I feel like for anyone considering becoming a parent, whether a parent biologically, adoption, foster care, we want to understand childhood trauma. We want to understand what a child experiences through life and why childhood is such a state of vulnerability in a way, but also that children can be very resilient. So obviously you had a deep store of personal resilience that got you through because you were successful as a child. You didn't get in trouble. You were a good student. You went on to join the military. You've been a successful human being by all measures, I would say, right?
Yes.
Yet you now look at things through this lens of, why do I react to things the way I do? And when I'm uncomfortable with this or that, why might that be? And I think for all of us, nobody is perfect. Everyone can look at their childhood and maybe figure out things that happen that maybe affect us now in a certain way, and it's a wonderful thing to do because it makes you a better adult, and in your case it makes you a better practitioner in the mental health field. But like I was saying, for people watching who are raising kids, if even on the face of it your child appears to be happy, and even if you're providing love and care and food and all the things a child needs, there still may be issues that lie underneath that need addressing.
Definitely.
So with all that in mind, what, if anything, could have been done when you were a child that might have helped you along the way to work through some of these things? Or is there nothing that could have been done given the circumstances?
I mean, maybe there wasn't nothing that could, physically have been done, but just a realization of what is going on can be a big help. And like I mentioned, in my cases, if I knew what the issue was, I'd know how to address it. If I knew that I had issues with abandonment or adjusting to situations, I would be able, or if I wasn't able to deal with it, I'd be able to let someone else know so that they can help me deal with it.
So let's talk about that moment when you first identified with the help of a therapist that you had abandonment issues. Can you take us back to what that felt like and how that changed who you are and how you think about things?
It definitely changed how I view things. Like you said, by all means, outwardly, I'm a successful person, but that you can be successful and still have these issues, because normally in order to progress, you have to bury these things. You have to get past them somehow. And that's exactly what I did. I buried it, and by burying it, it just caused more damage over time.
Okay, so you said you have to bury them, but I think what you mean is you have to uncover them and maybe get rid of them, or how do you look at
to
this
be successful?
now? Yeah, if you were to truly work through the issues that you've identified in a way that you think is the most successful, what would you be doing with the idea of abandonment now? Would you be burying it, or would you be...
If I had the realization, I would not have been burying it, but that's because I would have known what to do with it. And like I said, with the vulnerability, since I didn't know what it was or what I was dealing with, I didn't know how to address it, and I wasn't ready or about to ask someone else to help me with the issue that I didn't even have a handle on. So as time, I'm still, like I said, I'm still trying to deal with that and, learn that we all need help sometimes, and in that sense.
And having a mental health label, we were talking earlier, sort of mental health is a fluid state for many of us. Our mental health, goes up and down depending on what's happening in our lives, depending on whether or not we are confronting things that may have happened in the past. It really has to do often with how honest we are being with ourselves about things. And it sounds like in your case, you've really experienced an epiphany as you've unearthed some of your issues and started to figure out how to live with them a little differently.
Yeah, definitely. I did have a bit of an epiphany about where I stand and what's really bogging me down, and it has led me to this particular path in my life where I want to be of help to other people who are going through these things, because mental health is often seen as quote-unquote invisible illness, where people don't really think there's anything wrong with you, and they don't adhere to those issues until you go and you see that therapist and you get that diagnosis and you're taking your medication. So
to parents who are watching, you have a teenager who may have had some challenges in the past. In your case, did you ever demonstrate, did you act out, did you ever demonstrate some of the anguish that was inside you when you were a teenager, or were you pretty even-keeled throughout your teenage years?
I didn't think I was exhibiting anything until I was older, which was indifference. I had a severe indifference to a lot of things, a low interest in things. I was a little bit morbid. I saw things in a negative light as far as life was concerned, and how life progresses. So. And
why do you think that was?
I think that had a lot to do with my my issues of attachment, and I also think it has to do with the environment I grew up in. grew up in an environment that wasn't particularly, it was a predominantly black neighborhood. It wasn't particularly, I don't really have a word for it, well off area, but a lot of individuals were, like, for instance, if I was to go back home now, a lot of the individuals I graduated high school with are still on the corner doing God knows what. There was no
Hope?
I guess so. Like anything to advance you, make you want more. It was just, let's accept the way things are.
Status quo.
Yeah. And that was the type of environment I grew up in. So
Mm-hmm.
it was very hard to actually escape that situation.
But something in you was resilient. Something in you was pretty profoundly strong and courageous. It sounds like your siblings maybe were a little different. You're kind of unique in that you sought to get out and to look for things in the world.
Definitely. That all stemmed from my grandfather and my father, who were in the Navy, and they traveled and they brought back a lot of things from around the world. So it just baffled me how, and I later understood this, but it baffled me at the time how someone's world can just be something so small. For me, I knew there was much more to see and much more to learn and stuff like that. And as soon as I left the state, I immediately experienced different perspectives, different walks of life, and it was amazing. Ever since then, I've just, followed that path.
Good. So getting back to the parents' perspective, if we're wanting to learn from someone like you, what should parents be on the lookout for if there's a chance their child is having trouble? What kinds of things would someone have identified in your behavior back then, and how might they have better responded to it in a way that would have helped you back then?
I'm not sure if there's any particular characteristic that anyone could have just seen in me, but knowing my history and knowing that a child has gone through certain situations, that's more than enough to just be on the lookout for any differences or anything that you think is bothering your child or anything like that. I mean, asking questions is as good as anything, really. And my father did that. And if I could have given him my answer, I would have. I just didn't know what to tell him.
One of the things that I feel just knowing you as I do, is that it sounds like from your answer just now, maybe there isn't a lot that the adults around you could have done, because some of the challenge was created just by virtue of how your first 8 years of life played out. Of course, it would be ideal if you'd had an intact home. That might have helped with some of the challenges you face now. But given that it was what it was, it sounds like what you're saying is you had unconditional love around you. You knew that. You felt that. The rest of the journey may be an inevitable journey that you just had to go on.
Yeah. I mean, honesty would have helped. Openness would have helped.
Okay. What would that have looked like?
Probably from my grandparents' perspective, we can sit down, we can talk about, events that have happened. I mean, I was definitely old enough by the time I ended up leaving my grandparents' house. So even when my father came and got us, we could have discussed what was going on, but the only way I even got any information was through the fact that my older brother was a very emotional child who exhibited high interest in his mother, our mother. So he, when he got upset, that would make my father upset, and then,
things would come out.
Things would come out.
Okay. So sitting down and having family discussions. Dad's got to go away. This is why. He's going to come back when he can. Would that sort of thing have helped, do you think?
I mean, my father did that for us while we were at our grandparents' house, because we knew he was in the Navy. I didn't know what kind of life military naval person lived or anything like that. I just knew that he was away, and that was his job. If my grandparents had sat me down and maybe talked about, why everything happened the way it happened, or maybe even the details, because I still don't even have the exact details of everything that's happened.
With
And
your birth mom, with your
correct.
mom. Mm.
And I don't think I'm going to get that information unless I address it, which I will eventually. But.
And that's an interesting thing about parenting, and I guess the point we want to make is that you've said this, and we want to acknowledge that everyone in your life who was there, who stuck around, your father, your grandparents, they really had your best interests at heart, and they were doing everything they felt was appropriate and the best for you.
Right.
And I think often adults make this mistake of wanting to shield children from the truth to protect them, right? And that happens a lot in adoption. We don't talk about the birth parents because we don't want the child to experience feelings of discomfort or confusion, so we just kind of keep it under wraps.
Right.
Okay, this your birth mom, we're not going to talk about her because then you might miss her or wonder about her. And many people in the field believe that's a mistake, that you've got to honor children with the truth and trust them with age-appropriate detail, right? You don't want to give them the full gory story, when they're too young to handle that, but by giving children a little more truth and respecting their intelligence and their ability to make sense of it in their own way, you may be helping the child.
Right. And that's what I also see both sides of that. I do understand that they were trying to protect us, and they did see how our oldest reacted due to his attachment. So I would understand some caution to that effect. I'm only saying that if they did take a different approach with me, I personally wouldn't would have probably been able to deal with some of these issues that I'm dealing with today. With that being said, I think I'm better equipped today to deal with these issues than I would have been as a child. So I see both sides.
And so now you've chosen to go into mental health. We've just got a few more minutes to wrap up, but I think this is so exciting when people who've had interesting lives or who've struggled with issues or who've worked hard to understand who they are then turn around and go into mental health, because these are the practitioners who really can do the most good in the world.
Right.
So you were in the military, you've decided to get out and go into mental health. Why is that, and what do you hope to accomplish in helping others?
The main reason I want to go into mental health is because I've always wanted to help others, and once I found out that I wanted to be a social worker all along, because I had a misconception about what psychologist and a social worker was at the time. It just fit into place, and that's where I went for my therapy. I went to mental health, and I had a great social worker who worked with me through my problems and stuff like that, and she was an inspiration and actually my motivation in pursuing a career in mental health. So I think that I can, being that I've dealt with what I've dealt with and I have the experience with different things, I think I can help people in that aspect, in a micro aspect.
Give me one little sort of insight into a therapeutic technique that was successful for you in helping you cope with any one of the issues that you've dealt with.
Mindfulness. Mindfulness definitely helps a lot. Mindfulness takes on different forms for different people. What it was for me was just living in the moment and noticing the things around me, because through my mindfulness class I just learned that I was kind of drifting through life and not really noticing it. So through mindfulness I've learned to really take a moment and then take in your surroundings and know what's going on and stuff like that, even if it just means 5 minutes of silence in your car.
It's just sort of shutting everything else out, being present with yourself. How does that help with, if you're having an issue of, if you're feeling depressed or you're feeling anxious?
It helps, first of all, it helps calm you down, because it also comes with the breathing techniques, but it also helps you organize your thoughts. A whole lot's not going on now. Everything has stopped. Now you can really focus on what is causing your anxiety and what's causing these issues in your mind, and how do you prioritize them. That 5 minutes may, help you organize all that stuff and put it into perspective.
Great, that's so helpful. Okay, so we need to wrap up, but before we go, to parents who are dealing with children who may have come to them from foster care, or a child who lands in a new family at age 10, 11, 12, words of advice for the parents?
I would just say, just be honest with your children. A lot of parents don't think they're ready for certain levels of honesty, but they will be much more appreciative for it in the long run.
Honesty with your children.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, well, I am so grateful that you've been honest with us and you've taken the time to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been All About Adoption. My name is Christine Altwies. Thanks today to our very special guest, Patrick Taylor, to Alillo Studios, and to our wonderful executive producer, Chris Castignero. Until next time, aloha.